Oh dear. Okay, so Apple has just announced 4 iPhones. Yes, 4 iPhones. The tiny iPhone 12 mini, the iPhone 12, the iPhone 12 Pro, and the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So I'm just going to give you my brutally honest opinion about them, and then explain what was Apple thinking. So, last year's iPhone 11 and 11 Pros were actually really well received phones. And do you know why? It's because after years of Apple just kind of doing their own thing and just being Apple, it really felt like with the iPhone 11 phones, they were directly responding to what their users wanted. They lowered the price of the entry model to $699. They introduced an ultra-wide camera, and it was just so well integrated that using it just kind of felt like you were using your main camera and zooming out. They doubled down on battery, one of the historic weak points of the iPhone, and also started bundling in fast chargers. Now, on the face of it, with this new iPhone 12 series, it kind of looks like Apple's got a similar mentality of we're really listening to our customers, but it almost looks like they've taken it further. Like on the face of it, these iPhone 12 phones, they look like the biggest upgrade since the original iPhone 10. And most obviously, we've got a design overhaul. The iPhone 12s are incredibly boxy phones, and while I don't think everyone's going to like them, they might not be as comfortable as the iPhone 11s we have now, I do think it's a big move in the right direction. For starters, I've said this a few times, but the iPhone 5 and the iPhone 4, they're literally some of my favourite looking phones of all time ever. It's kind of hard to describe, but I'm just kind of drawn to the precision of a design like this. But it isn't just visual. See, boxy is also more space efficient than having to kind of build components around the curves you see on modern day phones. So that's at least a part of the reason that for iPhone 12, they've managed to pack everything into a body that's smaller from every dimension. They've managed to trim the bezels, much needed coming from that iPhone 11, which was starting to look very dated, all while using what they're saying is the strongest glass on a smartphone. Which you're probably tired of hearing. I'm pretty sure they say the exact same thing every year. But at the same time, did you see the number they quoted? We've seen a lot of companies this year getting really excited about the fact that their new phones are like 30% more drop resistant. The number that Apple quoted was 400%, 4 times more drop resistant. Although just bear in mind, they didn't mention anything about scratch resistance, which I would argue is more important for general wear and tear. Oh, also, every iPhone 12 has magnets in the back to allow the phones to kind of lock into place on a wireless charging pad. Makes sense. And this will also probably lead to a whole slew of new magnetic accessories for the phone, so we'll have to wait and see for that. So, design-wise, it's not revolutionary, it's almost like they've gone back, but I like it. Now, the one thing that Apple spent even more time talking about than design was speed. In fact, like, the entire theme of the event was high speed. Whichever one of these new iPhones you get, whether you get the base version of the iPhone 12 mini for $699 or the maxed out version of the iPhone 12 Pro Max, which will probably be $1,500, you're going to get the same Apple A14 chipset and 5G. And I would say both of these are more important than they seem. Because on one hand, right, every company improves their chips every year. So the fact that we're getting a new chipset is in itself not big news at all. The important thing is that 2020 is the year where smartphone chips are switching from a 7nm fabrication process to a 5nm fabrication process. Or, in simple terms, they've built the chip on such a small scale that they've managed to cram more power into an even smaller package. They're saying this is up to 50% faster than every other phone out there, with 30% more efficiency than last year. Hold off on those figures though, I'm gonna test them myself because the claims seem like a lot. But if that's even close to true, then that's massive. Like imagine if I just took your phone and added an extra 30% of battery life to it. That would take you from mediocre endurance to amazing endurance. But yeah, hold out for the battery test, and if you do want to see that, a sub to the channel would be absolutely epic. And then we've got the other side to that coin, the 5G. And on one hand, who cares? Yes, Apple has put more 5G antenna bands in this phone than apparently any other 5G phone, but at its core, the inclusion of 5G functionality is more of an eventuality than like an impressive feature to have on a phone now. However, it's good news for everybody. I think these iPhones, they're going to sell well. I think these iPhones are going to sell so well that they might well add 20 to 30% more 5G users into the market within just a few months. All of a sudden, the market is going to be flooded with millions of users who have 5G capable devices, who didn't a couple of months ago. And do you know what this does? It provides carriers like T-Mobile and Verizon a lucrative opportunity. If they can make their 5G networks as widespread as possible, they can sell everyone expensive 5G contracts. So, of course, that is what they're going to do. So I'd be willing to bet that by the end of 2021, propelled by this momentum from the iPhones, 5G carriers will really put an effort in to completely revamp and kind of accelerate the 5G infrastructure to be much wider reaching than it is now. The last main thing that's changed with the iPhone 12 phones are the cameras. And what they've done this time around is a little weird. So for the iPhone 12 mini, the iPhone 12, and the small iPhone 12 Pro, you pretty much get the same camera setup as the last generation. But with a slightly upgraded main camera, it has a better lens and a wider aperture, which means more light, better photos, better videos. And they can also all record high dynamic range video, which just brings out more detail. On top of that, both Pro models have a LiDAR sensor, which is kind of like an advanced depth camera. They can better understand the information in the room around you for augmented reality and slightly better portrait mode. But really, the main camera improvement actually only comes to the iPhone 12 Pro Max. This is the only iPhone to actually have an improved zoom camera, 2.5 times instead of 2 times, improved stabilization, and an improved sensor. And when you are talking about how good a camera system is, the sensor is arguably the most important part of it. It's a real shame that this is only coming to the biggest iPhone, but I think I see where Apple's coming from. Generally speaking, the people who get the biggest Max model, they're the enthusiasts, they're the people who want the best features. But the people who buy smaller iPhones and the non-Pro ones are often people who aren't gonna care nearly as much. But you knew there was a but coming. If you look at all these upgrades individually, it might look really impressive. But for the most part, in the Android world, we are very used to seeing upgrades like this. I don't think the changes we've seen on this generation of iPhone are anything like groundbreaking. I'd be willing to bet that we saw more improvements on Oppo's latest flagship, or Vivo's latest flagship, or Samsung's latest flagship compared to last year. And these new iPhone 12s, they are still kind of behind in some ways. Like, it is great that they've improved the lenses on the main camera, but the fact that most iPhone 12s are still using a tiny size sensor like they've done for years makes it now quite outdated hardware. Plus, it's a massive shame that these phones, none of them got a high refresh rate 120Hz display, because it makes such a difference to perceived speed, and you just kind of expect it on anything close to a flagship Android phone. It's possible that they planned to, but then because of the virus and because factories had to shut down, they couldn't produce the parts in enough quantities. Because you gotta remember, when Apple sells phones, they sell many, many millions of units per model. So every component they get, they need it in scale. They might have skipped it because they thought, oh, well, we're adding 5G. If we add a 120Hz display on top of that, it's gonna be too much battery drain. Or they might have just thought, we need to save something for the next iPhone 13. Whatever the reasoning is, I couldn't tell you why, but I can say that this is a feature, probably the only feature, that I'll really feel like I'm missing out on when using an iPhone 12 Pro Max. Plus, there's no charger in the box, which does have a planet conservation angle, sure. But at the same time, putting that side by side with the more affordable OnePluses and Xiaomis of the world, who, by default for free, include some of the fastest chargers in the world in their boxes, you can see that this is not an everything package. And quick note on this whole charger situation. So Apple's reasoning for not including a charger in the box is that you probably have one. And you can see where they're coming from. If you had an iPhone anywhere in the last 8 years, you probably have one of these small 5-watt charging bricks with a USB-A port on the back. But the cable that Apple is bundling in with this new phone is a USB-C cable. And the only iPhones in Apple's entire history to ship with a USB-C power brick are the last generation iPhone 11 Pros. So those are probably the only group of users who are actually going to be able to take advantage of this new USB-C cable. So it kind of feels like Apple should have just included a USB-C charging brick with all phones this year, and then saved this agenda for the iPhone 13s next year. But there's one important thing that makes me much more excited than I should be for specs like this. See, the way that Apple's business model works is actually based on not overpromising. The way Apple builds its customer base, its loyalty, the way they manage to keep customers on iPhone for such a long period of time is, generally speaking, by not making claims that they can't hold themselves to, by not disappointing customers or misleading them, therefore building their trust. So what I'm trying to say is that even though I think we can agree, what we've seen is not bleeding-edge, groundbreaking technology, at the same time I think that we can trust that what they have announced will be optimized and will work just as well as advertised. And we know that for smartphones especially, that is often not the case. For a lot of phone manufacturers, their business model revolves around being first, around making incredibly bold claims, even if you don't necessarily hold yourself to those standards, and even if you don't really care too much about the execution once people have bought into them. So anyways, what's the bigger picture with the iPhone 12 phones? Is Apple about to crush the competition? Well, I think that this new redesign, combined with the fact that they've managed to keep the same $699 starting price as last year, the same $999 starting price for the Pro models as last year, this tiny iPhone 12 mini, which is arguably one of the only phones in that kind of size bracket that you could even consider calling premium, all amidst Android rivals becoming more and more expensive, means that, yes, I think these new iPhones are going to sell really well. Plus, while last year the cheaper iPhone 11 was a noticeably cheaper looking phone, this time round Apple's kind of put everything into the cheaper iPhones. They look like their flagship offerings. I really think that because Apple has realized that their future relies on subscription-based services like Apple Music, they're doing everything they can to get people away from Android and onto iPhone, even if it means releasing twice as many models, making their lineup more convoluted. Apple has made absolute sure that they've got an option at almost every possible budget. And I'm willing to bet that the reason Apple made that strange decision to make their Pro Max version so much better than the Pro version is to appeal to the people who would have previously bought an Ultra Android phone, like the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, for example. Apple wants those users too. The iPhone 12 Pro Max is basically the iPhone 12 Ultra. Also, if you are considering buying an iPhone right now, even though Apple is selling this as one of their current phones, please do not buy the iPhone XR. It's 2-year-old hardware. For an extra $100, you are so much better off getting the iPhone 11. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, I worked through the night to make it, so a sub to the channel would be absolutely incredible. Also, a lot more iPhone content coming soon. Anyway, my name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.